Well, hello, COS supporters. Welcome back to COS Live. My name is Andrew Luce. I'll be your host for this episode. Rita's not here. She couldn't make it, unfortunately, but we have a couple of great guests that are going to be coming on in just a few moments. But first, if you were tuning in late last week, we did have some floor action in the Wyoming House of Representatives, and we got a stone's throw away from getting Wyoming to be the 20th state to pass the Convention of States resolution. So we heard late last Friday that our resolution, our application for an Article 5 Convention of States was going to be brought up on the agenda in the Wyoming House, and it was going to go through its second reading in the House. And there was lots of spirited debate on both sides. Of course, we heard the same old tropes, the old repeated lines that we hear all the time about runaway convention and you're going to lose your rights. Don't open up the Constitution. Can't do that. But then we also heard great arguments on the other side, passion for Article 5 and using it to save the Constitution. Anyway, the Wyoming House voted 25-32 against our COS application, and there was 5 legislators that were excused. So unfortunately, we didn't make it across the finish line, but boy, we got so close. We got to the 5-yard line in Wyoming, and we're going to bring on Deanna Beckett and Julie Baker in just a moment. I think that's the closest that we've ever gotten in Wyoming, but there are some great victories that we can find in this loss. And so actually, Gary, Producer G, can you bring on Deanna Beckett and Julie Baker? Deanna Beckett is the regional director for the Wild West region. We've seen you a lot on this program, Deanna. It's great to have you back. And then we also have Julie Baker, who's the state director for Wyoming. And Julie, it's great to see you again. I know you've been on COS Live numerous times. Great to have both of you. How are you doing today?
Well, speaking for me, I've been having a few days rest, to be honest. It's been kind of a whirlwind, and although, like you said, although we didn't win this time again, we did come closer, and I guess progress is always good. So we're seeing a little bit of progress each time, and we had a lot of support on the ground and in the legislature, on the House floor, right up until the vote happened. So that was really good. And of course, our Senate pass was fantastic. So, but anyway, the question was, how am I feeling today? A little bit exhausted, trying to get some rest and then get back on the horse, as it were.
Well, Julie, I think a better question I should have asked was, how many steps did you get in at the legislature? Because I know that you were pacing back and forth, talking to representatives, talking to people who were on the fence or who were against, and you were doing everything you could in your power to get those votes from maybe to yes and no to yes. So I guess that's the better question. How many steps did you get in? But in all seriousness, I mean, I'll go to you just one second, Deanna, but Julie, tell us just like how you were able to do it. I don't know how you were able to just put in that much effort and how your team was able to put that much effort, because we were looking pretty much like we were dead. And then somehow miraculously, we still got on the agenda and we're able to get some floor debate. So just maybe comment on how we were able to do that on this last Friday.
Well, it was a lot of effort from a lot of people, actually. People on the ground and inside the room, where it all happens. We had supportive legislators coming out all the time saying that they were, pushing the majority floor leader to try and get us up on the list, because we were on the general file, so committee of the whole, and there were a lot of bills before us. We started off on see, what day was it now, looking back? I'll just say the first day, because I can't remember what day it was. The first day we got on committee of the whole, we were at number 14 on the list, and then by that evening, we got pushed down to 24. And then when we came in the next morning, we were down on 25. And then by Friday, we were down at number 38 on the list to be heard. And Friday was the last day. If you didn't get through committee of the whole, then that was the end. You just got, it was dead. And so we were on number 38. We didn't think we'd get a showing, although they said that they might work until midnight. So, maybe we'd get a showing. We were just all ready to sit there till midnight. But it was a lot of effort from people on the ground, other legislators, I think from the other side of the hallway. people inside the room just pushing. Senator Santorum texted the majority floor leader and the speaker and said, what's it going to take to get us a hearing and get us a debate? And so it was effort from all corners, actually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's really incredible hearing that, just what it took to get it done. And you and the team were able to get the leadership to move, and, didn't move enough people into the yes column, but still a win being able to get onto the floor for debate. Deanna, I want to go over to you because even we focus sometimes on the loss, and we don't focus on how much of an improvement we've seen. And if you compare this session to session 2 years ago, it was a huge improvement. Has this given the team some confidence going forward to the next legislative session that we're going to get the job done in Wyoming next time?
Absolutely. Julie would be probably a better answerer for that question. But I just want to highlight some of the things that we did Monday. I know I messaged or I posted in our national communication device that we do that Julie and her husband, we call him the roadie. He's her driver. And they came in Monday for the committee hearing, and they drove all the way home Monday night, 5 hours away, if I recall. Julie, is it exactly 5 hours or really
it's close? It depends on how many stops. It can be 6. It can be, if the weather's bad, 11, but yeah, about 5 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. So she drove home Monday night, 5 hours. They drove home. And then they realized that Tuesday morning that we were back on, or we were on the potentially being heard on the floor. And so they drove the whole 5 hours back Tuesday. So Tuesday was your day one, Julie. I know it's all a blur. And we were just getting to a certain point where the constituent messaging wasn't getting through. And, every hour that clicked by, we knew we needed to get, on the floor. We knew we didn't have the votes, but we wanted the vote. We wanted the debate, and we wanted to have them verbalize their yes or no. And so we called in, and maybe I'm jumping the gun on your questions, Andrew, but we called in the whole state to message the legislators. So a lot of times we just keep it within the district. And we called in the whole state. And then from there, we called in. And if you're watching this and you're a leader, you probably got the email from me asking for your help to call and email the legislators in Wyoming. And we got about 80 to 100, 110, somewhere in there. Each representative in Wyoming got those messages calling for the need to get on the floor, and we wanted to vote. And they just trickled in over about 48 hours, just trickle, a few here, a few there, a few the next hour, a few the next hour. So the team on the ground, as they were working, all of these messages were trickling in, and it was just compounding, and it worked. And we can tell our stories of, what happened Friday afternoon, but I'll let Julie answer, how the team is coming around and looking at it differently. But absolutely, we got the closest that we've gotten for years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Julie, same question over to you. How's the team feeling as far as confidence? Do you think, even though we had this setback this year, is the team feeling like there's a silver lining in that we've gotten further than we've ever gotten in Wyoming, and that next year we're going to come back or next session we're going to come back and get the job done?
Yeah, one of the first emails I got from one of our district captains was, okay, we have to meet in April again and strategize as to what we do next year. So it was disappointing. Yes, it was an improvement. Again, get back on the horse. What do we need to do differently? So that's the thought. More town halls, more education, more reaching out to legislators one-on-one during the off season. And that's all we can do. There's people who have been were swayed at the last minute to go against Convention of States because there's another better way to do it that isn't in the Constitution, but don't worry about that part.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to just educate that, this is actually the way to do it. Now, other things you might be able to do other things as well, but you can't do them instead. So that's one of the messages we have to get across.
Yeah, I love that. There's a saying that we have at Convention of States that there's nothing more grassroots can't solve. And it's so true. If we just throw more grassroots at it, more emails, more education, and pound the pavement with more people, we're going to get the job done. And so I'm confident in you. I'm confident in the team. I'm confident that we're going to get Wyoming, and I can't wait to see it. Okay, so we're going to go to the debate in just a few minutes. I got a couple more questions for both of you before we share the recording of Friday's debate. So I'll go to you, Deanna. What's the call to action to the team, and what's the call to action to people who are not on the team yet? People who are kind of on the sidelines cheering us on and supporters of us, but they're not volunteers yet. What's the call to action to those two groups of people?
Absolutely. Folks on the ground, of course, call your representatives and even your senators who voted yes. It might be a little bit early. We want to probably wait till end of session, which Julie, I don't have my calendar right in front of me, so you'll know those dates better than I do. But definitely call and thank them, the folks that supported Convention of States, and but give them some time because they've got a lot of work on their hands to get through the end of session. And then for folks who it's kind of dual fold. For those of you who have gotten communications in the past and are not getting communications again, we need you to opt in. So, log into your Convention of States Action account and click log in or click reactivate and or get with your team and let them know that you want to get the communications again and be a part of it. And then as a general, call to action, we need more folks in Wyoming to be a part of this growing team. And you can work, hand in hand, one-on-one with Julie over the distance on Zoom or however we do that. And so go to conventionofstates.com/act and apply, no matter where you are in the country. I mean, whatever state you're in, but especially in Wyoming, we need to build that grassroots army a lot bigger and hit every little corner of the state of Wyoming.
Right. I love that call to action. Get in the game, whatever skill you have, whatever time commitments you have, we can use it to get the job done in Wyoming. I love it. All right. I got one more question, and I'll have this one be for both of you. So like I said, we're going to play the recap of the debate on Friday. Deanna, back to you. What moment stood out to you, if there's any that come to mind? What moment stood out to you during that debate last Friday?
Well, what's funny is, and I teased Julie, I know she was buried in her stuff. I teased Julie and my assistant. I said, why didn't anybody text me that Wyoming was up? I had gone and rested because it was late at Friday afternoon. I think it was after 5 here. And by the time I realized and knew that the debate was going on, it was 35 minutes into it. And I caught the last, 20, maybe 15, 20 minutes. But I was blessed to catch our Representative Daniel Singh, one of our champions, defending it on the floor. I think I heard him speak twice. And then, of course, the consistent bantering of our detractors, that it's just never ending, never changing. And it just proves the point where we need to do, like Julie said, more education and just constantly be in front of these folks. But I just enjoyed the elation of knowing that prayer was answered. I mean, we've got to come into this. I sent an email out about, 1:30 Mountain Time, thanking everybody for their messaging that they had sent in. And then I asked them to pray. I said, at this point, we need prayer to be able to pull it on the floor. And 3 hours later, we were on the floor, and it was an answer to prayer. So that was a victory right there, that we got the vote. We got everybody on record. And that was my highlight of the debate.
Yep. Now it's time to go to work and get those few that were against us, more than few, but get those people who are against us over to the yes column. Okay, Julie, any moments that stood out to you that the audience should look for when they watch the recap?
Well, before we go to the House debate, I know we're not showing the Senate debate, but I just wanted to give a shout out to our sponsor over in the Senate, who was instrumental in getting us a 70% vote in the Senate. So we were over 2/3 vote there. And he did a really good job representing us, I should say, at both of the committees, and then just really working the Senate, along with our other supporters in the Senate. But he really pushed it, and then helped us in the House as well. So in the House, something that Deanna said and was alluding to, the pro-Convention of States, the proponents, were all very calm and hopeful and positive in their speeches, in their presentations. And the contrast was the opponents were very negative and fearful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we typically see. And it was really, really obvious when you watch the debate that that's the way it was. And I actually heard one argument that I'd kind of heard on the side, but it had never been spoken as far as I remember on the floor, that all we have to do is not take federal money. And, and perhaps some education have to be done there because I don't see how that's going to rein in the federal government at all. But anyway, that,
good luck convincing other states to do that too.
Correct. That's right. Yeah. So just the positivity from our supporters, and the hopefulness, and the constitutionality. They would emphasize that this is part of the Constitution. This is what the founders gave us. This is the tool we're supposed to use. Not denigrating any other tools that might be, available to us, but this is the most powerful one and right. Peaceful one. So that stood out, I think.
Well, awesome. Thank you both for being here to kind of give your recap on what happened this past Friday, and for your humility and just your composure. It's not easy to get through all the way to the finish line and not make it across, and try doing that several times, over the course of however long both of you have been with Convention of States. So it's never easy to get so close, but I know that perseverance is going to win out, and Wyoming is going to be one of the past states, and I believe it's going to happen much sooner than we think. All right, well, Producer G is going to run the recap of last Friday's debate in the Wyoming House. We're going to get to that, and after that, we got a country to save, so it'll be time for us to get back to work. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Deanna. You two are stellar patriots in the fight for liberty. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Body, I bring to you Senate Joint Resolution 1, which is a call for the state of Wyoming to join in a Convention of States, an Article 5 Convention of States. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with this topic, an Article 5 Convention of States is referencing Article 5 of our Constitution, which is the built-in mechanism by the founders of this country to be able to execute the changing of the Constitution through amendments. The amendment calling process. And so what it requires is that there is an assembly of states, that the states come together on a shared purpose, some sort of topic to call a convention for, and then after they reach that threshold, then the states would convene, have a convention, and it would have to go through a rigorous process in order for anything to become the law. And so this is a particular joint resolution, and on section 2, which starts on page 3, it goes through, starting on line 11 on page 3, that there's an application to Congress to call for a Convention of States pursuant to Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution. That the purpose of the Constitution is to rein in fiscal restraint upon the federal government for the purpose of term limits on our Congress in Washington, or in the capital city over there, that direction, and that we join with the application with other states that are joining in the process. And so I believe there is a lot of there are a lot of thoughts on this particular bill, but I would like to go ahead and stand for any questions.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is perhaps the most consequential topic that will come across this body, maybe in some of our tenures. We're not talking here about what affects the states. We're talking about what affects all states. Now, my vote on the committee was for a yes, even though I'm completely against this resolution, because I thought it was wrong for a handful of people on the Education Committee to make this decision for the entire state. I wanted reps from all corners of the state to be able to speak about this. This could be the colossally largest mistake we've ever made in here. Now, I understand the national bandwagon towards this. I understand the driving factors. I understand out-of-control spending and out-of-control federal government. I understand career politicians who worry more about their donors, sometimes from foreign nations, than they do about our own country. I get all of that. But the United States Constitution is not broken. There's nothing wrong with it. The rule book is just fine. When we have people ignoring the rule book, writing new rules won't change anything. And I think of the damage that could happen from this type of convention to the United States because we have this fervor to get the federal government under control, even though we're already taking a step in the correct direction. You see it in the headlines right now. This resolution comes from the United States grassroots not putting up any more with an out-of-control federal government, but we're already pushing back. We don't need to change the rule book. All I can think of is we're tired of people speeding down the highway, violating the speed limit, so we're going to lower the speed limit. That's what we're going to do. We have people already ignoring the rule book, so we're going to add more rules to it. It doesn't make any sense. The potential for damage to this country and the potential for increasing divisiveness as states, like I've said in the past, red states become more red, blue states become more blue. I imagine a nightmare of 3/4 of the states ratifying changes that another fourth of the states who are already putting together task force to resist the current president, what their reactions might be to things like a balanced budget amendment, to a redefinition of the Commerce Clause, which basically outlaws programs, massive federal programs that are highly popular. I don't buy the arguments that we would lose Amendment 2. I don't buy the arguments that the country would be worse off in general. But what I see here is the potential for very little to actually happen in practicality and a lot of divisiveness. And probably my biggest fear in all of this is not that it would fail, but it would actually succeed. And at the risk of violating decorum here, I don't think we're smarter than Madison, Adams, Jefferson, and we should leave the Constitution as is, and if we need to change it, we have the old method, but this has never been done before. These are uncharted waters, and anyone who says they know what's going to happen is kidding you, because none of us will know what happened. So I urge a no vote.
Representative Yin.
Madam Chairwoman, thank you. So members, so this is a resolution that would basically say, yes, we want to create a convention, send a member to a convention. That convention theoretically would set rules. You know, this body has talked about germaneness to a specific subject many, many times. And we're believing that by passing this resolution, that the convention would stick to the subject that we would set for them in the resolution. So there's a couple of subjects in the resolution for particular things that we would want them to tackle in a convention. The issue with the convention is that we won't get to set the rules of what is germane to a specific subject. So by creating a convention that will then bring proposals back to the states for ratification, they could bring proposals that are way out of the realm of what we would consider necessarily within the subject of the proposal. And so that's my ultimate concern with an Article 5 convention, that just because we say it wants to be on specific subjects, that doesn't mean the convention will necessarily obey that and then bring back proposals. And frankly, even if they brought back proposals where we necessarily believe that they were outside of the subject of the convention, I don't think that there's any room for a court to say that those proposals are not within the subjects of the proposed convening resolutions. So I just want to put that out there for you guys, that calling a convention is serious business. It opens the door to basically the entire Constitution. And the idea that we could limit it to specific subjects, I think is folly on our part. And with that, I'm probably on and against the resolution, Madam Chairwoman.
Representative Stivar.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On and against, pull out the U.S. Constitution and look at Article 5. It's a paragraph long. Nobody knows what's going to happen when you go there. We just need to follow the Constitution as written. On and against.
Representative Webb.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, sorry. You're right. The Constitution is not broke. And we need to utilize it. We've each sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution. And, you know, it's always said, well, we pick and we choose. Article 5 is in there for us, to help us, we, the people, can help our state and our country to be able to make this country great. Our founding fathers were very cognizant of the separation of powers and checks and balances. An Article 5 Constitution to propose amendments to the Constitution allows us to be able to be in power. We're the grassroots people. We are the ones that ultimately have the responsibility for the direction of this country. We have nothing to fear but fear itself. I remember the first time I drove a vehicle when I was 9 years old, and it was a 1968 Ford truck, blue in color. And I popped the clutch, and my nephew jumped out because he was scared. I'll never forget that. What if Columbus hadn't sailed across the ocean? What if we hadn't lifted off Apollo 11? Where would we be today? I am strongly for this resolution and would encourage you to vote aye. Thank you.
Body, we've used proper names a couple times, so I'm just going to urge you to reorient to no more proper names. Representative Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So before we continue, I just wanted to address a couple of thoughts. So the conversation about whether or not we know what's going to happen. Will there be any set of guidelines to a proposed convention of states? And I would suggest that we have precedent with existing conventions of when states meet together, that they are able to follow the rules and get along and conduct business with each other successfully, that we do have existing precedent for how something like this could be undertaken. One of the most famous of these convening of states that our great state participates in has to do with a river system which goes all the way to the ocean to the west of us. And those states are able to conduct business and fight for water, for a shared resource. So there is existing precedent for the states getting together and talking about particular issues. And I do agree that we should follow the Constitution, and the Constitution as written, and the process for amending the Constitution is written in the Constitution. Oh, in the Constitution itself. In Article 5, the founders, I don't think we're necessarily smarter than the founders, but we've been endowed with the same responsibilities as they have, and they gave us the tools to be able to amend that Constitution. Written in it, it was one of the only things in that convention that was passed unanimously. Think about the things that get passed unanimously in this House. They have to be pretty sound or pretty boring ideas for us to all get along with them. But this was one of the ideas in that convention that it passed unanimously because they saw the necessity of being able to amend this document. Some people call it a living document because it adapts with the needs of society. And so that's part of the merit of why I believe in this. I'm an advocate for federalism. I believe that we need to stand up for our own states, and that the necessity, or that the tendency is for the larger, more powerful government to take advantage of the smaller government. And guess what, guys? We are the smaller government in this situation. And so this particular resolution empowers us to take advantage of a system that was written in by the founders to adjust the rules that we have this power. It's written in. The previous power that we had to send senators to the capital of this country was taken away from the legislature, taking away part of that balance between the states and the nation. And so this resolution, in addition to addressing those outlying problems that are laid out in the resolution, in addition to that, it addresses one of the underlying problems that we have, which is the weakening of state authority in this country, this union of states. And so I just wanted to share that, and we can continue the conversation.
Representative Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a constitutional process. A former president, so I don't mention his name, said, should the provisions of the Constitution here reviewed by be found not to secure the government and rights of the states against usurpations and abuses on the part of the United States, the final resort within the purview of the Constitution lies and in an amendment of the Constitution according to the process applicable by the states. We all took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, which also means to follow it. We often point fingers at the federal government, how we perceive them to be acting outside constitutional boundaries. But we should be pointing fingers at ourselves because we, state legislators, are key to ensuring the federal government remains within its constitutional boundaries. We have clearly failed. It is our explicit duty and responsibility to restore the balance of power between the states and the federal government when that balance has been lost, which it has. The federal government isn't operating under the Constitution as originally written, but as interpreted by the Supreme Court, which has either intentionally or inadvertently distorted the meaning. For example, some decisions made in the 1930s granted power that allowed the federal government to spend and regulate on anything they want. With amendments, we can reassert the original limitations which have eroded over the decades. Just like the 14th Amendment overturned a terrible Supreme Court decision, we can do the same. There are questions about how or if amendments will work. We only have to look back in history to see that they do work, and we can go back at least 100 years. And we are following all of those amendments. We don't have slavery. I can vote. The president has 2 terms in office, etc. It would be pretty good to have fiscal responsibility for the last 100 years or even 50 years. There's nothing dangerous about proposing amendments. There have been over 10,000 amendment proposals, only 27 ratified. The founding era proposed and ratified amendments. The Constitution was ratified with only 7 articles. There were no amendments, no Bill of Rights. Article 5 was one of the 7. They intended we use it, as they did, to limit the federal power. Our country has gone off the rails. It is the state legislators who are authorized by Article 5 to restore constitutional restraints on our federal government. We cannot correct this by using the exact tool the founders put by using the exact tool the founders put in the Constitution. Let's be a courageous, not a fearful body and engage in this constitutional process to restore our public. Thank you.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Remember, an Article 5 convention to propose amendments is not the same as a constitutional convention. At a constitutional convention, like we've heard in 1787, the states gathered pursuant to their reserved sovereignty and basic right of their people to alter their government, as recognized by their Declaration of Independence. But at an Article 5 convention, the states gather pursuant to their power and are limited by its provisions. The only power an Article 5 convention will have is the same power that Congress has every day in its session, the power to propose amendments. And that's only if they're ratified by 38 states, just like the 27 amendments we already have. Thank you.
Representative Closton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my third time voting on this. So my first time I voted yes. Second time I voted no. I learned a lot more about it. Now I'm voting yes. So one of the things I like about this is each state gets one vote, right? Wyoming is equal to, some of the larger states. So I appreciate that. People say, our Constitution's not broken. You're right. It's not broken. This is part of our Constitution. It's part of the rule book. You can't love our Constitution, but not this part of it, right? This is part of the Constitution. I always have a fear that at one point, one party will control the executive branch and then both houses. And I have a fear of them packing the court. I would like to see a constitutional amendment where we only get 9 Supreme Court justices, and they have age limits and they have term limits. This is the one way to do that. And for something to pass, you need both bodies of 38 states to approve whatever they come up with this convention. That is a very high bar to overcome. And I'm not sure it would actually ever happen, but I think what would happen is it would draw attention, the worldwide attention to what's going on at that convention. Can you imagine? We have a convention in states and we're talking about our debt or the Supreme Court or the federal overreach. Can you imagine the tension that would bring to some of the problems of this country that get ignored? Our national Congress would be forced to address some of these issues that we're all tired of. So again, on and for this. Thank you.
Representative Geringer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would completely agree. Our Constitution is not broken. It is not broken. But yet it does allow us to call this kind of convention per Article 5. What a perfect way to handle issues that come up like has been done over the last 27 amendments that have been done. These are ways that we can take into account issues that have arisen over time that weren't contemplated by our founding fathers. And I'm amazed at what kind of foresight they did have to be able to provide for all of these different things that we've had to deal with, and most times we can just refer right back to the Constitution and say, hey, this is good, this is not good, and yet they still provided us a way to be able to do something like this. It comes to a point where we have to ask ourselves, how do we fix the issues that we have? Do we let it? Are we trying to tell Congress to fix these issues for us? No, that'd be like asking the barber if I need a haircut. For those of us that have hair. But the fact is, as has been mentioned, we're also talking about this. This is not going to get out of control. In fact, with 75% of states having to ratify this, can you imagine this body coming to a 75% agreement on everything? On issues that are controversial in particular? That's a steep hurdle to overcome, but we're never going to even try to get there if we don't pass this particular resolution. We need to have that discussion. We need to provide for fixing some of the mistakes that are being made in that city to the east of us that controls a whole lot. You know, I've heard wisdom from my dad, my grandparents, that when you're in a hole, you need to stop digging. I think we're in a hole, and we continue to dig. The federal government continues to dig that hole for us. We are $34 million or $1 trillion in debt. When do we start coming back from that? It keeps growing and growing and growing, and all we're going to do is sit around and say, hey, stop doing that. Please? No, really, please stop. We have to take the control back. We as individual states, we as the people, have to take control back. And this was provided for in our original Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's go Representative Chestick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be brief. So there have been 37 amendments to the United States, 27 amendments to the United States Constitution so far. A little trivia question for you. How many of those 27 were approved by a convention of states? The answer is 0.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to mention that I'll concede the point that no leadership body should ever make decisions based in fear. Of course, these decisions aren't as simple as learning to drive a truck or send a few people into space. We're talking about the lives of over 300 million people and leadership in the world generally. You can't overemphasize the size of this issue of what we're talking about here. So I want to mention something here because I have to refocus this, that we are aiming at the wrong target. And I give you the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution or prohibited by the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Translation, if we didn't write it in this Constitution, the federal government cannot do it. And today the federal government does things that the founding fathers never would have dreamed of. Things that the empire from which they broke away probably would blush at. It's already in our Constitution that the government can't go outside these bounds. We already have a rule constraining the government from doing the things it's doing now. And it has been interpreted out of existence by some runaway judges, by some ideologues, by some activist judges. What would stop activist judges from today from immediately interpreting any new amendments out of existence and making them null and void as well? Again, we're shooting at the wrong target. There are people ignoring the rule book, so we want to add more rules for them to ignore. That's all we're going to do. We're not going to walk up to them and say, if we go up to them with the OGs of amendments, the Bill of Rights, and say, you can't violate these, and they laugh. Well, we got some new ones. Now you can't violate these. They'll laugh at that too. There are other ways to get the federal government under control other than just put up a larger 10th Amendment sign and hope they obey it now. Thank you.
I think that's the first time I've ever heard the term OGs used on this floor. Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against. When I first got out of high school, my first profession was a mechanic. And pretty quick that I learned if you want to be a good mechanic, you have to be able to diagnose. Because if you start treating symptoms and fixing things down the line from what's really broken, all you do is waste your time because it's going to cause the problem again. And a lot of you at this point are thinking, oh, well, we got to fix the Constitution. Now the Constitution, as most people have said, isn't broken. So what's the real problem? The real problem is people that are not paying attention people that are apathetic. But eventually, when things get bad enough, people start coming out of their apathy and letting their voices be heard. Now, I want you to take a look around this room. How many of us are freshmen? How many of us are sophomores? And I would submit to you that there's a reason for that. That a lot of people, and I'm not trying to discuss the relative merits of one position or another, I'm just simply saying a lot of people looked at what was happening here in this Capitol and said, I don't like it, I'm going to send somebody new. We folks are an example that term limits are not necessary. What is necessary is an educated, responsible voting public. And so what we need to be doing is to exposing what's going on, encouraging people to come out of their comatose lives and pay attention to the things that are affecting them. And we take care of that. The Constitution isn't the problem. The problem is people who ignore it. So if you change the Constitution, as the tall one from my county says, all you're doing is changing rules that don't get bigger signs won't necessarily slow anybody down. I've said enough.
Let's go Representative Larson JT.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and for this joint resolution. Members, if we don't pass this resolution, we become the problem. We are the ones that are standing between change at this point. It's not going to happen unless we stand up for what's right. And so, and on top of that, I want to, I think that a lot of us might not be here if it weren't for if the problems at the federal level weren't so huge. Because that's what I see a lot of us running on, is federal issues that need to be solved, and then we try to fix them at the state level and we can't. So we got to get our federal level under control, and this is the way we can do it. This is the way we can give our constituents the power to change the federal problems. On and for, I encourage and I vote.
Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of points I wanted to address. So this convention of states, it would have a one state, one vote system. And so that is a significant benefit for our state specifically. Being the least populated state, our punches would hit heavier than any other state in proportion to one another. In order to attain the amount of states to ratify a proposed amendment to the Constitution, they would have to get past a whole legion of states that are collaborating on a same issue. So in order for anything to get passed at this convention, it would have to be something that states agree on. So one of the reasons why I ran for office was because I saw the legislature as an opportunity to be one of the most effective voices for my community in proportion to the amount of people that live there. Our races are smaller than some of the other county or municipal races that exist, and it was an opportunity to directly represent people on the issues that they cared about. And like the previous speaker had mentioned, a lot of the issues that our people care about the most are actually on the national scale. I'm sure so many of you have had conversations with your constituents, and they're concerned about something, but it's really something that has to do with the federal government and the failures on the federal government. I hear things, so much concern about the national debt. And this national debt that we have, it didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of bad precedent. It came out of practices being done on the Eastern Coast that our people simply didn't approve of. And this is the opportunity built into the Constitution to address those concerns from a state level. It gives the states the opportunity to check that federal power from the union. And these are issues that the legislative body over there simply will not take action on because it requires that they be held accountable. This is a built-in mechanism for our states to take a stand for what is a pressing matter to our people. And so, again, I urge and I vote.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is probably one of the most interesting conversations we're going to have this year as it bounces back and forth. And it's a dividing conversation because everyone has an opinion on this. Is Article 5 part of our Constitution? Absolutely. No doubt about it. And was it a mechanism that was placed there for correction? Absolutely. But I'm just going to give an example. The Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution limits the ability to coin money and issue bills of credit. This means that basically no one shall create any bill or credit or make anything but gold and silver coin as tender of payments of debts. Well, I look here, and I won't hold it up because I can't use a prop, Mr. Chairman, but on this bill in front of me, it says this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. And I ask the question, where's the point where we are already out of that constitutional line, among many others? And if we were to turn around and look at our good founding father, John Adams, when he says our Constitution was only made for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for the governments of any other. Morality and virtue are the foundations of our republic and necessary for society to be free. If we're being really honest, you guys, if we were to look at where our nation has come, we're no longer a moral and just people. And you may disagree, but if we were to take and ask those founding fathers, I would say that they would agree. And so we are at a point right now where the morality and justice of our nation is called into question. And so what we're going to do is this. We're going to take and we're going to bring people together to try to fix a document that honestly isn't broken. You know, if we were to go back and we were to look at some of the things that have happened in this nation over the last 5 years even, I don't know, and this is it. People can stand on either side of this conversation, but there's a lot in this room probably that would agree that in 2020, there were some nefarious things that maybe happened in an election and maybe someone didn't quite get in. Not because of the votes cast, but because of how the system was actually set up. So I would ask this question, if that is the case, then why are we standing here thinking that they would not go after the most sacred document this land has? Now, I would hope that if we were to see in Article 5, this convention, go forward, that we would see all the things we are hoping for. I would hope that. But the truth is, we have a track record. I have actual proof that says, you know what, if we're not a moral and just people, then how could we expect moral and just results out of this? You know, a part of me, and I'll be honest with you, there was a time in my life that I thought this was the answer. But the more I've looked at humanity, the more I realize that the moment we open our Constitution up to this scrutiny, we take the opportunity to have something happen that we do not intend. And again, everyone's passionate on both sides of this, and at the end of all this, we will agree to disagree. And probably of me speaking right now, I'm not changing anyone's mind. But I am saying this, if we're not careful, you guys, we could be responsible for undoing the greatest government that the nation, this world's ever seen. We are standing in a place right now, and right now on a screen in front of me, I'm looking at the longest standing government document in the history of mankind. And it stood the test of time. Why? Because we didn't mess with it. It stood the test of time. Why? Because we didn't make a mistake when we did. And there is a process right now to bring about that constitutional change. There already is a process, and it does not require us to open it up. So, you guys, I would just challenge you that we as a
people need to make a very wise decision today about how we go forward with our Constitution.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, thank you from the last speaker, took away half of my notes. So I do agree wholeheartedly that our Constitution only works with a moral and just people, and we cannot legislate that. We need to attack it at the root cause, and we all probably have different opinions on how we can get our nation back on track. To address a few comments from before, there are only 2 things listed in the Constitution that the Convention of States cannot do. First is we cannot ban slavery before 1808, and the second is deprive the state's representation in the Senate, and that is it. So there's no further rules listed in any of our other founding documents, and there's no reason to believe that anyone will follow what our resolution says. So let's focus on morality and get our nation back to a moral and just people.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The problem today that we're facing is more complex than that our officials or our Congress are simply ignoring or disobeying the Constitution. The real issue is that certain provisions of our Constitution have been twisted from their original meaning and interpreted to mean something very different. Federal officials today follow the Constitution as interpreted by the highest court in the land. Consider the ACA that deals with affordable care. We know that nowhere in Article 1 of the Constitution, Congress has the power to force individuals to buy health insurance. The highest court in the land interprets that. And we know that that's not what was intended. The federal government doesn't ignore the Constitution. It takes advantage of loopholes created through practice and precedent. And the only real way to close these loopholes is through an Article 5 convention. And that will reinstate limitations on federal power and jurisdictions with our modern, clear language. Thank you.
Committee, before I go on to the next person, I'm just going to do a brief heads up here. We are on the last day of Committee of the Whole. This is the last day that you will see any of these bills come forward. We still have second and third reading starting next Monday and Tuesday. The only reason I'm bringing this forward to this body is a gentle nudge and a gentle reminder that if there is any vetoes that are passed forward after these bills move forward on second and third reading, while we are in session, he has 3 days to send those back to us. After those 3 days, we are no longer able to override those vetoes. So the more time we spend debating these individual bills, and I'm not telling you to not do that, I'm just giving a gentle nudge. The more time we spend doing this, the less time we have potentially able to override any vetoes that come to this body. So with that, Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I heard today that our Constitution isn't broken, and I agree with that. I heard today that our founders were a heck of a lot smarter than we were. I agree with that. In fact, they were so smart, they gave us this tool. They gave us this option. They were so smart that they knew these days we're experiencing living in today would come. Now, we have to be smart enough to use the tool they gave us. On and for this resolution. Thank you.
Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little bit of a history nut. I've studied some ancient history and some of the empires that have risen and fallen over the centuries. And as you study how they came to power, I also studied how they declined in power.
And they declined because they started to change their form of government. That's when they started to decline. We became one of the greatest powers on earth 200 years ago when our Constitution was written. I don't necessarily think the people that wrote our Constitution are any smarter than we are. I believe they were inspired of God. I believe our Constitution came from God, not from men. And it was given to us, but if we start changing it, I think we're going to lose some power, and we're going to lose our form of government eventually, and we're going to be on the decline, just like these great empires in the past. Now, I want to make this really fast, but because we got a lot of work to do, Mr. Chairman, and I got a lot of push to bring this to the floor, knowing that it was going to take some time. But when we first met 7 weeks ago, remember what some of the first things we did as a body? We wrote our rules for this 68th legislature, and we set our agenda. If we call a constitutional convention, what's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to write their rules for the constitutional convention. I've heard here just this past hour, we need a constitutional convention because of a need for term limits and a balanced budget. But during the past hour, I have heard multiple other things that need to be changed. How do you think they're going to get together in a constitutional convention and just deal with two issues? I do not believe that will happen, because in this little body right here, we've already heard a number of other issues that needs to be fixed. That will happen also. And I strongly believe our Constitution was inspired from God, and it was given to us for the greatest empire on earth in Earth's history, and I do not want to change that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 1988, in the highest court in the land, a Chief Justice once wrote, "There is no way to effectively limit or muzzle the actions of a constitutional convention. The convention could make its own rules and set its own agenda. Congress may try to limit the convention to one amendment or one issue, but there is no way to assure the convention would obey." Some wise words came from 1798. Where powers are assumed which have not been delegated, a nullification of the act is the rightful remedy. That same founding father said, "Whensoever the general government assumes undelegated powers, its acts are unauthoritative, void, and of no force." I echo the concerns of a concerned constituent that in our polarized times, the convention may become a battleground for extremist, special interest, or those that are looking to change the Constitution, risking changes that undermine the liberties that we hold dear. The Bill of Rights and this piece of legislation claim to protect what could be gutted, not because anyone intends it, but because nothing in Article 5 prevents it. I stand before you today in opposition of this because I, too, trust the founding fathers and the great Constitution that I swore an oath to in this office on and against this bill.
Representative Brady.
Thank you, Chairman. Just as a reminder here, we're not speaking of a constitutional convention. We are speaking of a convention of states. And I agree with the legislator earlier, the Constitution isn't the problem. And again, I agree. But I'll also say the Constitution is the answer. 10th Amendment issue, I agree that we have our states' rights, but the federal government is tyrannical at this point. So what I'm saying is, another point about being, talking about the money and being trillions, 34 trillions in debt and chaos everywhere. But then again, you say our government is the greatest government in the world has ever seen. Then state what dire straits we are in, and then still be able to claim we can't have both sides of this. And you say it's a godless, immoral, and unjust society. Why can you, any of you, are you going to raise your hand if I claim that every one of you in here are unjust, immoral, godless? And you said they go after the Constitution. Who is they? We the people? I stand on this. Esther 4:14, perhaps you were born for such a time as this. I'm for the...
Representative Geringer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really do enjoy this form of government that we have, that we're able to stand up here and we're able to debate, we're able to have these discussions about things that truly do impact our state and our country. This is fantastic. You know, we heard at one point that writing new rules won't change anything, and I guess I'd submit to you that if writing new rules doesn't change anything, we wouldn't have a constitution in the first place. We wrote new rules. Our founding fathers wrote new rules. We overthrew a form of government that we didn't agree with. And I'm not suggesting that we overthrow this government. I'm suggesting that we write the rules that enable us to take power back from an overbearing federal government. We also heard that there's other issues with the Constitution, that we don't follow the rules right now. And I guess I would submit to you on that maybe it's time that we as states assert our power as states to take care of these issues. Because it is our form of government. This is not redoing our form of government. This is exercising the powers enumerated to us as states to protect our form of government. So I would ask you also to make a wise decision today and consider what we do. What do we do? How do we fight back? We've heard that there are other ways to do that, but we're not finding the solutions. If we keep on the path that we're on, we have not found any solutions to this point. We keep digging that hole. On and for.
Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against this bill, and I strongly urge everybody to vote against this. The truth is, the previous speaker said it, we have the capability to make a difference. We absolutely do. We have the ability to push back on the federal government right now. We have the ability to really strongly take a position on the sovereignty of our state, and it's got nothing to do with the Convention of States. Let's do that first. Let's take back our state sovereignty with the tools we already have in our toolbox. Quit thinking that if we reach out there, somehow magic's going to happen. That's not going to happen. Okay, we're going to take back the sovereignty of our state right here in this room by telling the federal government where they are breaking those laws, where they are overstretching those boundaries. No, that's the answer. Please vote no on this amendment or on this bill.
Speaker Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Listening to all this debate, and I've never heard anything really mentioned to this point about this, and in my conversations with some of the folks that are really pushing this on a national level, I went down and listened to them. They were here earlier, got an opportunity to listen to some of their talking points. And you're talking about a balanced budget. You want to go back and you want to curb spending on this federal government. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Stop taking the money. It is within our power and our reach to quit allowing the federal government to drag us along as states when they dangle money in front of us all the time. How are you going to get 38 states to agree to quit taking subsidies, ag subsidies, other subsidies? We can do it right now. It was clearly enumerated. Everybody here has said we have the right to be able to stand on our own. All those powers that are not clearly enumerated are the responsibility of the states. The control that they have over us is money and our incessant desire to continue to consume it. And with that consumption of them dollars, ladies and gentlemen, comes the control of the federal government that we willingly give them in exchange for the dollar. With the shekels come the shackles, ladies and gentlemen. We can stand up here and bloviate all day long about how this is going to change. And unless you change the appetite of the people of the United States of America and stop having to rely on federal funds and seek those funds, this is not going to change. A balanced budget, in my mind, is truly out of our reach because we cannot get shook free of those dollars that they dangle in front of our faces to keep us under their thumb. And until we can control our spending, we best be for leaving that document alone. Because until we control that spending, we don't want the things to change. We're glad to take the money. The money is the controlling mechanism in this, ladies and gentlemen. That's how they've done it. That's how we're generating $1 trillion every 90 days. It's because we can't control our spending. Our addiction to federal money. That's what ties us up. If we can break free of that, we don't need it. On and against the bill.
Representative Hirschman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just the context of history is really important. World War I, World War II, massive federal debts. Paid all that off. Never incurred debt. Since the 40th president, debt is basically doubling every president. And I don't think it's us taking the money or anything else. It's the appropriators in Washington, D.C. So on and for the amendment. Thank you.
Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to land the plane here, folks. Thank you for this thoughtful discussion, and I really do appreciate everyone sharing their opinions on this. This is a contentious issue. And so just to close this off, we bring this bill in an effort to strengthen the position of the states, to give them an outlet for them to express their concerns with the Constitution in an organized manner, which is described in the Constitution itself. We talk about the rights that are delegated to the states that can't be impeded upon by the government. That particular language had to be amended into the Constitution. That itself was a change that had to be made in the Constitution. And so the mechanisms to change, if we identify problems in our system of government, particularly problems where the states themselves are disenfranchised, the lesser populated states themselves are disenfranchised, we have the opportunity here with this resolution to give the smaller states and the states apart from the federal system, that was that was being referenced earlier, the federal government versus the states. And this gives the states the opportunity to have their say as an additional check in our system of government. And I believe that was a feature from the get-go. It was written right in. And when we changed the Constitution was changed in the past to take power away from the states. And from that point, the states have not had the opportunity to express themselves like they did in the past when the legislature was the one to send a senator to our capital. And so that is really the spirit of this resolution, to ensure that Wyoming has a voice and is able to bring themselves to the table when this table comes about. And this is not isolated to Wyoming. There are states all across the country that want these particular issues to be talked about. We are not doing this in isolation. And so I'm asking for your aye vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Andrews' motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate Joint Resolution 1 do pass, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The chair will make a call before division is called. Thank you. Having failed a voice vote, a standing division vote is required. All those in favor of Senate Joint Resolution 1, please rise. Please take a seat. All those opposed, please rise. You may be seated. Having failed a standing division vote, according to Rule 6-6B, a roll call vote is required. Chief Clerk, when you are ready, please call the roll. Representative Wiley, can I have you come to the dais, please?
Alamand? No. Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? No. Brady? Bratton? No. Brown Gary? No. Brown Landon? Byron? No. Campbell Elisa? No. Campbell Kevin? Chestick? No. Clouston? Connolly? Repeat? Davis? Eklund? Erickson? Filer? Geringer? Guggenmoss? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Heft? Jarvis? Johnson? Kelly? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Lean? Locke? Lucas? McCann? Nicholas, excused. Ottman? Pendergraft? Posey? Provenza? Riggins? Rodriguez Williams? Schmid? Sherwood? Singh? Smith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Thayer? Washut? Wasserberger? Webb? Weber? Worf? Williams? Winter, excused. Wiley? Yin? Mr. Speaker, are there any changes? Jarvis, no. To aye. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 25 aye, 32 no, 5 excused.
Having failed a roll call vote, Senate Joint Resolution 1 is indefinitely postponed. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.